going to want to at least disconnect the battery. I've gone ahead and taken the whole battery out to charge it following this alternator failure. But with that done, I can go ahead and start focusing on this airbox removal. So up front, there's 2 bolts. They're each an 8mm. And with those out, you can then go ahead and loosen this hose clamp, which is also an 8mm, before disconnecting the harness for the mass airflow sensor, and then just pulling the whole airbox out. Next, you'll need to drain some coolant out of the vehicle. You don't need to get all of it, but you do want to get at least enough that the water level is below the upper radiator hose. We'll need to disconnect the hose at the radiator, and so this will just eliminate having a big mess to have to clean up. All right, so with some of that coolant drained, I'll just take a pair of channel lock pliers here and use that to disconnect this upper radiator hose on that hose clamp right there, connecting it to the radiator. Disconnect that side, be able to scoot this whole thing out of the way a little bit, and then that will allow me access to go ahead and start working on getting the fan off the radiator. And once I get that off, I'll show it in a little bit more detail as far as the different connections, bolt locations, things like that. Okay, fan is out, and as you can see, there's a lot more room up here to be able to work. And for the fan itself, there's going to be 2 bolts up at the top. So this is going to be your driver's side, this is going to be your passenger side. So driver's side up a little bit higher near the top, passenger side down a little bit lower, and then there's going to be 1 electrical connection to undo right here. Don't worry with this, that's just connecting the 2 fans together. That's going to be your only electrical connection. And those bolts are 8mm. And then for the bottom, there's no bolts, but there is these feet. So there's, let's see, well, there's that one right there, just above that lower hose. And then same on the other side. So you've got lower hose that is right here, and then that little support right there that the fan's going to slide in and out of. So that's going to take care of the bottom portion of it. Right in through here, that's our alternator, and that red cable there is attached to it. Whenever we get everything unbolted and disconnected, we're going to take it this way and then up from the front. There's really no room in between the front of the engine and that inner fender to do anything that way. So it's going to slide this way and then up. So that's why we're getting rid of all of these things in our way, all these hoses, all these fans. Okay, here's a closer look at the alternator, and this is where I'm going to go ahead and start, because I can go ahead and access these pretty easily. So this cable and this harness here, go ahead and get those pulled off, get them out of the way. There are actually only 2 bolts on this alternator, one up at the top and then one at the bottom. And the one at the bottom might be a little bit more difficult to get to, but fortunately it is in a slot instead of a hole. And so you really just have to loosen that up and kind of pull it out a little bit, and then you can kind of hinge off of it instead of having to thread everything through. You'll see why that matters here in just a minute. Next step in getting the alternator removed is going to be releasing the tension on the actual serpentine belt. So right there is your tensioner, and you can see that square notch that's in it. And I'm going to use a serpentine belt tool. I absolutely recommend you do the same. Rent one if you don't already have one. There really is not enough room between the tensioner and the side fender there to fit like a breaker bar or a ratchet or anything. If you have a very, very super slim ratchet, then maybe you could get that in there. But again, my recommendation, just go ahead and get the tool. It'll make things a lot easier. So I forgot from the last time I had to take this belt off that you actually don't really have enough room with this tool to release enough tension to get that belt off. And so what I ended up doing was I had my wife just go and hold this all the way as far as it could go, and then I got underneath and actually slipped the belt off of the tensioner itself because there's no ribs or ridges for it to get caught up on. And so to put it back on, I'll just do the same, have her release all the tension, slide it back on there after I've routed it around the new alternator. Okay, the first bolt that we'll have to deal with is actually a stud. It is a 7mm on the end here, and what you can't see is a 15mm nut that's on there. Go ahead and just crack that 15mm nut loose, and then you can go ahead and take the whole stud out with the 7mm socket. To show you and to even access the other bolt on the bottom, we'll have to take off the tensioner itself. It's going to have 3 8mm bolts holding it on. Once it's gone and out of the way, we can access that bottom bolt. Right there is going to be that bottom bolt. It's a 15mm. Okay, so from what I was saying earlier about it being a good thing that the bottom dog ear of this alternator is slotted is because, as you can see, this bolt right here that runs through it is too long to actually remove. It's going to hit this inner fender well, but as long as we pull it out as far as it will go, or at least most of the way, to clear a through hole that's in the back of the alternator, that front slotted area can just slide right off of it. So now what we're going to do is grab the alternator here from the front, and we're going to rock it back this way and see if we can't slide it and pull it out while simultaneously being careful not to hit our radiator, because the last thing we want to do at this point is to bang that alternator into the radiator and punch a hole in it. Old alternator out, new alternator ready to go in. Always a good idea to compare your old and new parts. These look like they're going to be fine. This is obviously dirty, but through here is a discoloration where it's been burned. So that's going to be the indication of this did indeed go bad and it went out. Usually when the alternators fail, there's some kind of burn on the outside. Here is that slot that I was mentioning. So on the back side, it's just a through hole, but this will squeeze or clamp down an inner shim. And so if you can just clear this back hole with the bolt, then you can just slide the rest of it off. It did end up falling all the way down whenever I pulled this out, so I'll have to put that back in partially before securing everything down, but that's fine. And I ordered this one online. I ordered it brand new. It did come with test results of a bench test that it passed everything. If you're buying this in a store, even if it's brand new, even if it's straight from the box, ask them if they'll test it. I have seen alternators fail straight out of the box, and this is not one of those jobs where you want to go to try to crank this up and realize you have a bad alternator and you have to do this all again. So bug them, ask them to test it if it doesn't already come with test results. Installation is going to more or less be the reverse of the removal. However, I did go ahead and take the coolant reservoir out. This is just because it gave me a little bit more access to route the belt and to install the bolts that are on the tensioner. After getting everything buttoned back up and reassembled, though, the only thing left to do is to start up the vehicle and check for any leaks from the coolant, anything like that. There was a little bit of smoke coming off of the exhaust manifold for some coolant that was burning off, but after a quick test drive, we are air light free. So that's going to do it for this job, everybody. It's not a fun one, but then again, none of the jobs on this vehicle really are. That being said, it's definitely not the worst one I've had to do. Let's just say you hope you don't own one of these vehicles when the water pump goes out, because that's not a fun one at all. But if this video helped you out, please give it a like, Subscribe to the channel if you want to show your support or see more videos like this. Thank you guys though for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Check in on your friends that work on their own vehicles. They are not okay.